Okay, so we were just going to start with where were you raised?
Okay, I need to go back a little bit and take you to Germany prior to World War II. If you've taken any of the classes about European history, we lost, the Germans, when I say we, I mean the Germans, lost the war in World War I, and there was a treaty drawn up called the Treaty of Versailles. And then in 1933, the whole country was just in uproar. And it was in such economic state that a person like, and you've heard of him, Adolf Hitler, started his proceedings in government. And one of the things he wanted to do is to extend the borders of Germany, for Germany to become, again, a very powerful nation, the most powerful nation in Europe. One of the things that he allowed was he allowed German people to resettle. And in resettling, he gave them property in areas like Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. And that's what happened to my mom and dad. In 1939, they were married. And so he gave them land in Poland. And it was like homesteading in our country in around the 1900s. And so the people that he took the land from and gave to us became our servants. And that was in Poland. The name of the village is Góra Wojciechowska. Not necessarily rememberable, but that's where we were settled. And that's where my sister was born, and that's where I was born. And then, of course, my dad had to go to war. I was not born until he'd gone away to war, came back to visit Mom and my sister, and then had to return to Holland. And soon after that I was born, and the people who were our servants took care of us. My dad could not fight, so he allowed himself to be captured by the British. So he was a prisoner of war in England. My mom did not know this until much later. And so that's where I was born. And I think I showed you some pictures of my birthplace when my sister and I returned about 8 years ago and met the lady who took care of us while we were there. Her name was Mrs. Brozak. And at first I had my doubts that she remembered us, but when she speaks only Polish, and we had an attorney who was with us to translate for us. And she came up to me and she stroked my cheek and she said, "Mein liebes Linchen," which means my loving little Lina. And she said to my sister, "Call me Mamusha," which means call me mommy. She had a son the same age as my sister, but he was killed in the war. So that was a very, very emotional time for both my sister and I.
So you said that your father fought in the war?
Yes.
And what was his beliefs when it came to...
He could not fight. That's why he allowed himself to be captured. And I believe he was in Holland at that time. And he just spent the whole war in Britain.
Did your mom agree with your father?
Oh yes, of course, I'm sure. But one of the nice things that this lady, Mrs. Brozak, said to the attorney to tell us was, she said the Engel, that was my last name, the Engel family were wonderful people. And so that speaks a lot for my family.
What was your favorite childhood memory?
Before 6 years of age, I had
That's understandable.
my sister as we were growing up as children, she became my very closest friend, almost my surrogate mother, and she would never let me go anywhere without holding my hand and taking care of me. In fact, when I was very young, I had problems with wetting my panties, and she would take her dry ones off and put them on me, and she would wear my wet ones. So she was very, very precious to me.
So, where did you live post-war?
Okay. Maybe I should relate a couple of incidences that happened during that time that have left memories, not pleasant ones, but nevertheless, they're memories. One time my mom and my sister and I were taken to this large room. I have no idea where it was or what it was. And there were just benches along one side of the hallway, and there were rooms. And they were taking women into the rooms and questioning them or whatever. And I heard screams behind those walls, and then the soldiers came and took my mom. And I ran after her because I'd never been separated, not really separated from her. And the police, or the soldier, picked me up by my collar, and as he did that, my mom asked him to put me down, and the other soldier slapped her face, and then he tossed me back to my sister on the bench, and I will never forget that. And years later, Mom showed us the knots she had received in her legs from a beating that she had received during those days under the Russians in Poland.
So that was when you lived in Poland?
That was when I was in Poland. And then when I was 5 and my sister was 7, she was allowed to go to school. And of course I couldn't, and yet I didn't want to be separated from her. So I went with her, and they had the country-style row desks. You had a bench, and there was room for 4. Well, I was the 5th. And so the teacher said, how old are you? I said, I'm 5, but I'm very smart. And he says, you can't stay. And I said, I'm not going to go. And so not long thereafter, I was thrown out of the classroom. And that really hurt me a lot. And I'd start just playing by myself because I knew I couldn't have Polish friends. Germans weren't popular in Poland. And so I had no friends to play with, so I played by myself. But what I did is I got some of my sister's resources, and I started teaching myself to read in Polish. And then one of the things that the Polish mandated was that all German prisoners had to take Polish education. And so they had to go to a night school. And so now and then they'd come over and I'd help them with their reading, and they thought Mom had helped me memorize it, but my mom could not read Polish. So I did speak and read Polish, and after all, that was my first language. Yeah. To this day, I do not speak Polish.
That's interesting. So did you live in Poland after the war ended?
Yes. I was born after the war, and we were not released until 1950. But in 1949, my dad was released as a prisoner of war for Britain, and he had come home to live with my mom's sister who lived in East Germany, and that's communist Germany now. So then she tried to escape in 1949, and I still have the little net basket, I'll show you later maybe, that she put all her belongings in. And she put some food, etc., and put them in a cemetery, and hid them in a cemetery, thinking that if we didn't get through the borders, at least we'd still have our food. Well, the food was gone, and my mom was beaten and we were ridiculed, and things became very, very hard for us at that time. And that was in 1949. I might step back a little bit and tell you about when I was 3 years old. My mom, when we were put in a concentration camp to begin with, it was a large warehouse with bunk beds, and there were lots and lots of women and children. And I do remember in the bunk next to us was a young woman who was missing her 2 little sons. And we slept in the same bunk, my sister and I, with my mom. And I remember one night the Russian soldiers brought 2 little boys to her. And she just cried for joy. And I witnessed this, and I was so happy for her. And yet the children had been away from her long enough that they did not remember her. And so they didn't want to stay with her. And I remember how sad I felt for the boys and how sad I felt for the mom not being able to have this relationship with her 2 sons like I had with my mom. Now that happened in a large warehouse, and I quite frankly remember that night, but I was very young and I thought we just stayed there overnight, but we were really housed in there for 4 years. And so then after that was disassembled and women were able to choose more, one of the things that my mom was given a choice of is to be the chef in the Baron's kitchen. I showed you the picture where the Baron lived. And in so doing that, it became much better for us as a family. By this time I was 4 years old. And the Baron didn't have any children, and he was a young man. He was very kind, and he used to try to show me affection by putting out his arms as I was walking down the street and trying to give me a hug. And I ran the opposite way all the time, because at that time, men had no place in my life. I mean, what I saw is men were evil. I never knew my father. There was no man around, because it was all women and children in the concentration camp. And so I tried to keep my distance from him. And then one time,